Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. We have returning guest Zester, who is also Mark Z's son, who's been gracious enough to join us on a part two of the deep dive that we had a month ago with him and his esteemed dad on all things financial currencies, cryptos, and specifically the blockchain mechanics. So, we're going to get into a little bit of a more 101 because a lot of you in the audience requested to have sort of a rudimentary refresher before we build on that and the other questions pertaining to thereof. So we're going to be covering that with Zester today. If you're new to the podcast, please do like, subscribe, and share. Helps the channel grow and others to gain in the knowledge currently being afforded. As you know, Mr. Zester here, this young man, has almost 10 years of experience in the blockchain wholly, working with all aspects, content creation, all the way to programming and building, which is the genesis of how he got to where he is today. And he's going to be able to help us navigate going forward into the remainder of this year into 2026 with ISO 20022 up the rear in just 5 days. So with that, Zester, thanks for joining us, good sir. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much, John, for having me back. I had so much fun on our first conversation. I'm very excited to be back. And yeah, as soon as you said that, ISO, it's 5 days in terms of that one coming into effect for US banking. It's exciting.
It is. And so what I want to do is take that question about the ISO on Saturday and tie it in, if you would, Zester, graciously, in terms of a lot of people kind of came away, wow, a lot of information. He was great. It was a great dialogue, but how to make it palpable for the everyday person, a little bit more digestible. So if you would, if you could give our audience the Reader's Digest on what you shared last time, and then segue that into ISO and the importance on Saturday, if you would, please.
All right, all right. And so that one's definitely that one's a lot like eating an elephant. You have to decide which end to start at. And so in terms of kind of simplifying the idea of blockchain technology, because I think from the comments that I had seen that there were some folks where that was really the biggest firmament, the biggest foundation that would help with being able to build upon it. And it's also one of the most difficult ones to simplify. Ultimately, if you were to take a blockchain and really boil it down to the simplest explanation we possibly could, you would take it to a situation like a small group of people, a village of 50. And I know this seems very, very odd to use as a as an example for something so grand and so based off technology, but there is a historical example to actually use, and they are known as rye stones. Now, rye stones were created by a Polynesian island many, many thousands of years ago. And what they did was they had these large carved stones that were around the island. They're too big to move. You could not move them. You could not say, hey, I'm going to move this over to John's house. And it's obviously John's. I can't move it over to Zester's house. It's immovable. With their technology, there was no way to move that stone. But the entire community knew who owned it. It's John's stone, and it conveys value. John can trade it. He can move it to another person. The stone does not move. That rye stone, and when I say that it's RAI, you can look this one up. It's a very interesting historical dive, but it's the best example. And it couldn't be moved. It's immovable with all technology. And so the stone is there, and we know who owns it because everyone in town knows who owns it. It's John's. And when I traded it to John, I went around and I told everyone on the island that I traded it to John. And so it did not move, but everyone on the whole island knows who owns it. Effectively, that is what's occurring on a blockchain and a cryptocurrency. We're all agreeing on who owns it. We're not moving it. It never moved. It didn't change from one wallet to another in that sense. It didn't go anywhere. What we changed was the ledger. And that's why people regularly utilize the word blockchain ledger. And ledger in that sense is the same as you would see it in any accounting sense. It's the ledger you keep to ensure that you can pay your bills each month. It's the same exact idea. The difference here is that that ledger, who owns that rye stone, is being held on computers worldwide, millions of computers know who owns that stone, who owns that Bitcoin. And that's what's occurring each time. It's transparent and immutable. Once that change is made, it can't be unmade. Everyone agreed that I'd agreed to trade my Rye stone to John. Once that has occurred, it has occurred. And that's where it's trying in that way. And I hope that helps taking it on a very small level. You need to take that idea of everyone on the island knowing who owns that stone
Mhm.
and everyone who has owned that stone in the past and take that to a worldwide level. And now place that into the sense of a blockchain ledger. Everyone knows where each part of the blockchain is at and who owns it. And so anytime it moves, we all get an update. And that's probably the simplest way to understand essentially what's going on in terms of cryptocurrency.
So it's like taking our own individual identifier and making it set in stone.
Yes. Yeah. You've taken your social security, but without that risk.
Right.
And you've said, hey, here's that number. That number owns this. Not John. That number owns it, but John owns that number. And that's where ownership and that idea that I had talked a lot about comes into effect because it changes that. John owns that number. That number owns that, whatever it is, whether it's Bitcoin or stones or whatever it may be.
Totally understood. Thank you for that. I think it was a great way to simplify the process. I pray everybody, was able to take what you said and kind of go, okay, that makes a little more sense, and it brings it into focus better. So now let's, because I want to make this tight and focus with you, of course, as you know. So I want to share something with you here, Mr. Zester here, and this ties into the ISO question we were talking about a moment ago. This came from Kenny Wayne. Breaking news: U.S. Senate likely to vote on Clarity Bill November 24th or earlier in the session, starting on the 18th, which would be tomorrow. House of Representatives passed the bill on July 5th. Boom. So make that make sense for the audience, please, good sir, tying into the importance of the back wall of Saturday, the 22nd ISO, and what implications does that have for us in the banking system as it relates to the currency reset?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I'll start on that one with the ISO, and then I'll circle back
Perfect.
to the Clarity Act. And so ISO 20,000 2022 is what I've just decided, or ISO. Messaging standards between banks are set to go into full enforcement on November 22nd. And so at that point in time, all messaging standards between any banks operating in the United States will have to adhere to ISO standards. This is very important in terms of banking going into the future, and it presents a very, very odd situation for many different cryptocurrencies, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. And it's because of essentially, I think a lot of information that has gone out in regards to ISO. There are a lot of different beliefs around what it's going to cause, what it's going to result in. And one of the important factors that I think people need to remember with ISO is that it is a messaging standard. XRP is not ISO. And I'll let that sit for a second. It's not. There are no ISO tokens. There are no ISO coins. XRP is not an ISO. HBAR is not ISO. XLM is not ISO. The blockchain they operate on is ISO compliant. And I know that seems like I'm splitting hairs, but it's a very important hair. This is a monumental sized hair. This thing is ingrown and it's growing out of control. It's huge. And so we all need to remember that one. The XRP ledger is already ready for ISO compliance. The XLM, ready for ISO compliance. HBAR, ISO compliance. XDC, ISO compliance. There's a long list of them. I know that y'all probably have a longer list than I even have out there because there's a lot of them. And I've done deep dives into so many of them that I can't even remember where the number's at. There's a lot that are ready for it. What we need to remember is that this is a messaging standard. And what we need to see is how the other cryptocurrencies adapt to this new ISO standard. And so I'm very excited about November 22nd in regards to ISO coming into full effect between banks. I think that it's going to lead to a massive increase, even in the speed in which banks are adopting blockchain technology, because ISO is pretty much impossible without blockchain technology. It's very, very difficult to adhere to the messaging standards without blockchain technology. And when I say that it's very difficult, I mean it's essentially impossible. Um, Blockchain is a necessary part of this shift. Where we see these banks start to go, where we see the other blockchains go come the 22nd, I think is going to be very, very important. Because I have a belief that we're going to see certain blockchains start actually going through votes to adopt ISO banking standards. And I think that's potentially going to be the that's going to almost dwarf the other news, is that Ethereum is suddenly going to say, hey, we have a proposition to push forth the necessary requirements to ensure that the Ethereum blockchain is ISO compliant. And so that one is very, very interesting. I'm very excited for where it's going to go, but it's an important point for folks to remember that essentially it is a bonus because all of our ISO blockchains have an advantage, but it's also not a guaranteed date. I don't expect on the 22nd to see anything all that exciting, besides a lot of news articles talking about it. But I don't expect ISO tokens to have a 100% day. I expect them to have a better day than they would if it were just a normal Monday or a normal Tuesday.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you're going to see, Zester, to your point, is a momentum rollover into the week of Thanksgiving, really catching its majority of momentum into December. Christmas, I shall make them happy, and then rolling through into January onward. So it's an on ramping process, for lack of a better word, which this whole reset has been ostensibly. But I also think, to add to your point, Zester, is that the significance too for us in the banking world is doing wire transfers for people who are about to get their currencies reset when they go to get their monies in their accounts and they want to send it or gift somebody or whatever, pay off things, do this, do that, humanitarian funds. They'll be able to do in fractions of seconds without banks manipulating wire transfers, going through the SWIFT system, trying to accumulate more Fed interest to line their pockets. All of that is on the blockchain, is completely transparent, and that nonsense stops. And that's very important and encouraging for where we need to be. Interestingly enough, Zester, I didn't tell you this, but I went to my bank last week, Wells Fargo, down the street from my house. It's been a wealth management center for the past 2 years. It's one of the first ones I saw here in California actually get up and running with the offices and all the cubicles and stuff, which you can see those are being set up for currency exchanges. And when I talked to the wealth manager, and there's a big inherent difference between a wealth manager and a private banker. That's how the wealthy elite do with a private banker. They can basically buy a house or a car right there and they'll do it for you. They told me that they now have the ability to buy cryptos on your behalf. And this ETF setup that you talked about in the last show with your dad, I just had a guest on a moment ago who's informing me there's 8,000 ETF banks and exchanges happening. So take what you said with multiplicity on that level, and it's staggering. Yes.
I'm sorry, John, but
No,
to kind of roll into something in terms of the XRP ETF. The XRP ETF Canary Spot XRP ETF that launched last week on Thursday, it went for live trading. There are over 900 ETFs that launched in 2025. ETFs and ETPs that launched in 2025. XRP just broke the record in one day. $58 million in volume occurred, but 900 of them have occurred in the year. And so We're not talking about a small ecosystem. This is huge. Now that is considering the overall global markets, but I think it was somewhere around 600 were just based in the United States alone. And so yes, there is so much more going on in that space than just one to pay attention to.
Absolutely. So let's tie that back into where you're talking about the Clarity Act. How important
Mhm.
is that and what you see dovetailing?
And
So,
the Clarity Act, and well, this is one opportunity in one situation where a government naming a bill actually is fairly accurate. And the reason I say that is I think back to some of the other acronyms that were used for different legislation that were definitely a misdirection. The Clarity Act for cryptocurrency is very much based around clarifying the rules. Very much based around the idea of clarifying what are the rules about me opening up a cryptocurrency, what protections do I need to have for potential investors or participants, etc. It's an extremely important foundational bill, really, in the process. We need it before we can ever get the Bitcoin Act. We cannot get the Bitcoin Act of 2024 or 2025 until we have the Clarity Act. And that's something I had talked about, and I noticed some comments that were a little confused about the Bitcoin Act of 2024 presented by Senator Cynthia Lummis back during the Bitcoin conference in November of last year. Ultimately, that was a presentation of the final answer. And they gave it to you, and they handed you where we're going. We're not there yet. And there are so many steps necessary to get there. But they gave you the final answer. What is the United States planning on doing? They are planning on going through a process of regulating and mainstreaming cryptocurrency and essentially empowering it to be capable of being the new financial system. And then they are going to revalue US gold and they're going to move the United States economy over to blockchain technology. They gave you the answer. The bill was reinitiated in 2025. It will not pass until all of these bills pass. We need the Clarity Act. We need further, much more clarification on derivatives and other things in terms of financial instruments going into the future. We need that. There are more bills after the Clarity Act. But the end goal is the Bitcoin Act of what was 2024, now 2025, and it will become the Bitcoin Act of 2026. That's how legislation works. Each year it rolls over. If it's reintroduced by the Senate or the House, it then adopts the next year. It was readopted in 2025. I have a feeling it's going to be readopted in 2026. But that's where we're working towards. And we need the Clarity Act to get there. We cannot have the new financial system until we have the laws and regulations necessary to maintain the new financial system. It's a process. As unfortunate and unpleasant as that process may be at times,
yeah.
I personally remain ecstatic. I, on a daily basis, continue to get more and more confirmations that we're headed in the right direction. So,
Sure. No, that's fine. Thank you for that. I appreciate the clarity, no pun intended, and the honesty thereof. Play on words. So one of the things you were really passionate about talking to us about today was an article that I posted last week. I think you're talking about on my report with respect to Currency 365, John Nigo pointing out what he thinks President Trump should do as an op-ed piece with regards to freezing the naked shorting and the AI bots that have been killing the exchanges, therefore killing our portfolios, because one, as you know, one thing leads to the next, a systemic flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other option of pumping QE, quantitative easing, which I try to hopefully explain to my audience in a way that was digestible to them, just basically artificial debt that blows up the old Fed bubble so it implodes on itself, making way, as you said, for the new system.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about what was important to you in that, and then share with the audience, if you would kindly, what you see as the realistic, measurable choice that President Trump's going to make that will bring us into a
Mm-hmm.
super bull run and the reset.
Mm-hmm. No, no, that article you had sent me, John, definitely extremely interesting and poignant for the point in time. And this is something that I know folks that have listened to me over on the show are probably tired of hearing about. I hate the vast majority of the current stock market gambling instruments. They will call them financial instruments. They're not. Shorting is illegal. It has always been illegal, and it never was a possibility in a moral, legal society. It is gambling. It's not an investment. It never should have been considered as one. Leveraged positions, margin trading, all of these things, in my mind, and I strongly will argue, and I'll die on that hill, are not only illegal, they are evil because they essentially do not benefit, they do not create anything. An investment and some of the necessary standards for an investment, you can ask the United States government, or they are based around an intrinsic growth. They are based around the betterment of the economy, the production of valuable intrinsic goods. None of these instruments fall into any of these categories. They provide no intrinsic good. They provide no product. They produce nothing for the average American or for anyone around the world. And you will hear economists die on a hill arguing to you that they provide all of this value. Oh, they help with price discovery and all these other things. It's all complete BS. They cannot defend it logically at any point in time. I've even argued with AIs on this one, and AI cannot defend their point logically because there is no defense for these things. There really is not. What they did was they tricked us because the average person pretty much doesn't know anything about how the economy works. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean that in it's historically true way. We do not understand how our economy works. Not on average, not in any form or fashion. And we never have throughout all of human history. It's very hard throughout written human history to find examples of an entire populace understanding how their economy works. And that's what they took advantage of. They convinced us that these things were beneficial. But think about who made them. Financial institutions make markets. They make markets. Financial institutions made these things in order to reallocate funds from us to them. And the statistics back that one up 100%. Look at retail traders who utilize any of these tools, they all lose their money. The only people that win in this game are the institutions. And they've done it because, yes, they were allowed to, and all they're doing is reallocating funds. What I strongly believe should occur, strongly believe, is that Trump should immediately demand a disclosure of all derivative exposures for every corporation, every entity in the United States. They should have to reveal all financial data in regards to their exposures in financial instruments.
So a full scale
This is
financial
step
audit,
one.
basically.
Yes, what are they shorting? What are they longing? What are they leveraged on? Because we don't know until we get those numbers how much fake money exists. Essentially, this money is not real. These leverage and financial instruments have been utilized to create fake money outside of the Fed. And the Fed's already creating fake money, so he doesn't need help with it um, at all. And it very much lends in to your idea on quantitative easing in terms of that one. It very much leans in. This is all fake money. We need to know where all the fake money is being created. And Trump needs to immediately place caps on leverage. Immediately. There should never have been a thing as 100x leverage. And for those that are curious what I mean, leverage is when you take a position on, say, Bitcoin or a stock, and you say, hey, I think the price is going to go up. And so I'm going to take a long position. I got $1,000, but I want to invest 100,000. But I only have $1,000. But I'd like to invest 100,000. And leverage allows you to do that. You are going to pay fees. You're going to do all these other things. But what just happened? I only had the ability to buy $1,000 of Apple stock. We'll use Apple as an example. That's all I legitimately had the ability to buy. But because of these regulations that the financial institutions have essentially forced upon us, I'm allowed to say, no, I'd like to invest 100,000. And what does that mean? I buy $100,000 of Apple stock. Well, what happens when the price of Apple drops 1%? My position is liquidated. And so my $1,000 just created $99,000 of downward selling pressure on Apple stock. These financial tools allow these corporations to manipulate and control our markets because I'm using that on a small level. That's me. I can put together $1,000 and take 100x leverage. What does that mean when a financial institution can put together $1 billion and take 100x leverage? They can literally destroy our economy, and it was never fundamental. It was never real. It is entirely artificially created. And so, John, I get so angry about leverage trading, about shorting in and of itself. And I don't have a problem with shorting. Shorting is okay. My problem is shorting with leverage. My problem are margin calls and margin options. I strongly believe that we are moving towards, and this is what is being created, we are moving towards a far simpler system in regards to how finances work. Cryptocurrency lending is based off of collateral. You go back a couple hundred years ago, how'd you get a loan? Collateral. And we've changed how that system works. And that's where all this funny money is coming from.
Great, great, great summation. I really appreciate that, Zach. And I think it's a perfect illustration. Taking that into the everyday societal construct for people, just to complement what you said, it's much akin to somebody saying, well, I'm 5'7", but I'd like to be 6'4".
Yeah.
Unless you're plastic, man, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. But the
Or
bank gave me a loan and said it's real. You'll show them the bank statement. I'm 6'4".
Yeah, because the banks are always known for telling the truth. The banks will fix it, right? Because the banks certainly aren't the problem. Or the naked shorters with gold and silver, where a lot of our audience buys gold and silver, saying on the back end, well, I want the price of silver to go down so I can control the flow of it, but I want to buy more for myself and keep everybody else. So it's just basically legalized theft, not moral, but legalized theft. Yep. And you're right. So take everything you said, now what he should do and what we see with QE, and split the difference. What do you think he will actually do, and in what period of time?
Okay, well, and so I was, and that's probably the best question you could ever ask, John, because that's really where the brass tacks, that's where the rubber meets the road. It's not what he should do, it's what he will do. What he should do is he should absolutely ban short selling today. He should ban short selling, he should ban leverage, or he should, at the very minimum, should reduce leverage down drastically, essentially to the point of 1-to-1. I have the ability to invest as much money or as much value as I own. He should absolutely do that. If we were living in a perfect world, he would pull all of these triggers today. He would split deposit taking banks from investment banks immediately. There's an inherent problem by having the bank that you are trying to keep your money for the long term also be an investment bank. They should not be the same. Those are two different entities. They serve two different purposes. He should go ahead and ban the creation of all derivatives. No new derivatives of any form or fashion. Immediately. But I don't believe that he will go this hard. And that's why I presented essentially what I believe he's more likely going to do and what is more of the easy process. If he immediately, and I mean tomorrow, in this hypothetical situation, if Trump did exactly what 365 exchange, exactly what he said, our economy would crash tomorrow. It would crash immediately. Not a matter of minutes, not a matter of seconds. Our economy is a house of cards.
Like that.
It's not real.
No, it's not. It's an
It
illusion.
would be an immediate crash. And it would bankrupt the Trump family. It would bankrupt essentially every single person who has a loan out on anything. If you own everything in your life completely outright, you would still be in a terrible situation because the value and price of any good you needed to survive would go haywire. But for the worst case scenario, it would be everybody who is a part of the financial system. The financial institutions would go bankrupt. The banks would go bankrupt. The NASDAQ, the stock exchanges would go bankrupt. Everyone would go bankrupt in a second because of how over leveraged the markets are. And that is something you can very, very easily see in the current prices. They're not legitimate. They're not real. They're not based off of any fundamental creation of value. And that's where we're having this big problem. We stopped valuing generative wealth. We stopped valuing things that are generating growth. And we started valuing financial instruments that reallocate wealth. And that's not our fault. That's the financial institutions' fault. They did that. And that means they have created a system that cannot sustain the immediate shut off of free money. It can't. Look at 2008 and 2009. Why did they say it was too big to fail? Because they created too big of a problem. It's not our fault. It's theirs. But we will be the ones paying the price. And so I strongly believe that Trump is going to go with the slower approach, not only to protect himself, which there's always going to be. It's a survival bias. We all do that. It's human. He's going to protect himself and his family, his loved ones. But I think that it's more so a matter of genuinely protecting the United States. I think that instead of him fully outright banning these things, he's going to go with the previous plan that I had talked about. He's going to go ahead and make it illegal to make new exotic derivatives. He's going to start reducing the leverage cap on it. And he's going to make people disclose their exposures. And I think that those are going to be the first steps. And if those start to happen, I am going to be beyond giddy. Because if that is what he starts with, I know where he's going. But I think he's going to do that to save a lot. He's going to save a lot of people, a lot of trauma. And I think that there's still a belief that they can keep this from being a catastrophe. I think there's still a belief in the same way that if you and I were in charge of it, wouldn't we try? I feel like we'd try. We wouldn't want people to suffer. And I feel like there's still an effort going on in some corner of the mind to figure out a way to do this with the least human suffering. But the answer is ban it all today and the market will collapse.
I'm so glad you said that, Zester, and thanks again for the articulation of the whole overarching point. It's like the old expression, you can't, back in the 90s, ESPN, you can't stop them, you can only hope to contain them, with regards to athletes.
Yeah.
It's the same axiom here. I don't know if you saw the show that we did a week ago with my friend, Mr. B. Now, his background is in the Keynesian system, Charles Schwab, 28 years now, but he also has the currencies and the bonds, cryptos, metals, everything that we have. So he's got a nice balance between his personal and business acumen, but he does all this charting and analysis. That's his gig. And so he looks at market trends, S&P 500, the Dow, treasury bonds, metals. He sees all these puzzle pieces and how they amalgamate and fit. And he has been rock solid for the last 2 years. I've had him on since we had our podcast. and he came out in November 23 and said, "Hey, this could take another, year or two." And here we are. And now he's saying his market predictions with solid data, not just
Mhm.
hypotheses. To your point, is saying that by March, the first quarter, we're going to have to see the old system collapse. And that's what we're trying to do is like Noah, get as many people on the boat to with that knowledge and uh, activity, taking action, changing the mindset, and moving in lockstep to get as many people on the boat to avoid said collateral damage. Because I think that's all you
Mhm.
can do is you just drag it a few more months to give people time to get to shore, and if they take it, they take it. But we're really trying to get our audience, your audience, as proactively synergized in the most honest, literal sense to avoid,
Mhm.
that culpability, to avoid, getting capsized ostensibly. And so I'm really glad that that struck a chord with you as far as that. And I'll just ask you one more generic question to honor your, not essentially generic, but one more question to wrap things up on the reset for today to honor your time. Just your own personal belief. Now we've talked about the cryptos, we've talked about the leverage positions, and you're right, we are over leveraged and we have been for quite some time. How many households have credit card debt and go into debt every Christmas just to keep the appearances up and the lights on to look like
Mhm.
everything's official when it's anything but? Now imagine that on a grander scale with our economy, which is an illusion to your point.
Mhm.
It's on a very grassroots level, it's bad. So if it's bad here, how much worse is it over there? Is what you're saying. Talk a little bit briefly about what you see with precious metals, that manipulation that's getting freed up because it's all correlated.
Mhm.
The foreign currencies as well. We see a lot with Sudan. He just made the cover of Newsweek. They're showing the election part. There's video that shows President Trump meeting with U.S. envoy to Iraq, Mark, I think I'm saying this name right, Mark Savaya, that they are solidifying that and they're not letting Iran, as your dad knows, get their dirty, corrupt militias in the pot of
Mhm.
Iraq going forward. Just talk about that briefly, please.
Mhm. Well, John, I think I'm very glad you mentioned the idea of essentially like an individual with the credit card, the Christmas and everything else, because I think that is a great way of looking at it, because it's not something, it's creeped through our culture. It's cancerous and it's metastasized. Many Americans are responsible for essentially the same mistake that the financial institutions are making. It's just individual, as opposed to being all of our problems. But if you put enough individuals together, it makes all of our problems a lot grander. But I think in terms of, and I'll just go ahead and say commodities on the whole, but gold and silver in particular, when it comes down to it, this process of deleveraging and removing those options for financial institutions is going to have the largest effect possible on gold and silver, because they have been historically being suppressed now for 50 some years. Go further back, you can easily make an argument they've been suppressed in value for hundreds of years. But very definitely, you can pinpoint Bretton Woods as, if anything, being a 1000%. They started suppressing the value of gold and silver on this day. I would argue 1930s, but that's a guarantee. And so, with this move over to blockchain for all of the accounting, over to blockchain for all of the ideas of ownership and verification, and including these ideas of removing the ability for leverage and things of that nature. We are progressing very quickly, and this is going to be very contingent on Trump's decision in regards to leverage and things of these nature. We need that decision, in my opinion, for precious metals to really start getting where they need to go. And we need them to get there for the final step. We need gold and silver to find true value. We need them to, because they are the final step. As I talked about earlier, we're going through the regulations, we're setting up the rules, we're setting up the ecosystem, we're setting up the technology, we're building the football field. Field of Dreams reference on that. We're building it. We are out there in the cornfield. People are building it. They're building that field.
Yep.
But ultimately, they're going to build it. And when they're done building it, teams are going to come to play. And we're in that process at this point. We are getting so close to that ability to achieve that said field of dreams. But ultimately, we still don't have lines painted. We still don't have all the corn down. We still don't have field posts up. And that's what the Clarity Act is. Clarity Act in this metaphor would be the lines. It would be the umpire. And we don't have that yet. We can't play yet. We're not ready to play the game. And so these are very important steps in the process. And I am not in love with everything that is inside of the Clarity Act. I think there's a possibility that we end up with another bill, and that this one may fail. It's possible. But I think that we have already all the legislation sitting on the docket necessary to get us to the Bitcoin Act. And that, in my mind, that Bitcoin Act, where we revalue the Federal Reserve gold and precious metals, and we begin the crypto strategic reserve. Remember that Bitcoin Act is an acronym. It doesn't mean Bitcoin. It means blockchain intelligence. It's a whole acronym. It doesn't mean Bitcoin. It means all digital cryptocurrencies. And so it will be that point in time where we will have set up the ability to revalue the precious metals and the reserves of the Federal Reserve. We will remove it from the Federal Reserve because the bill explicitly states that all funds will be removed from the Federal Reserve and back to the United States Treasury, as we have been hearing for decades on this front that was going to happen. It's in the legislation. They gave it to us. They gave us the ultimate answer. When that bill passes, we are done. Until that bill passes, I highly believe that we are still just continuing to progress towards it. But in my opinion, it's the final step. But it could honestly change. Bills get parsed back out, reappropriated, pushed back into different other legislation. But as of right now, if you were to look at the final goal, that's the bill. When that bill passes, we have revalued. Gold and silver has revalued. The United States financial system has reset.
Yeah.
And that will be the final clarion call.
That's a perfect way to put it. What I'm encouraged by, Zester, is that I think that it's accelerating now because you just can't push it back anymore. It's come to an untenable pace, and I think we're going to see it a lot quicker than I think even we realize or people realize. And that's what has me encouraged. It's just there's just too much momentum. I think he's really got it pretty well under control, and at this point, he's going to release it. And when he releases it, as you said, he's buying enough time once again to get us as a community, hopefully a society would be nice, onto the shore, onto the boat, away from, danger and harm's way. And unfortunately, in any situation, you don't get 100% cooperation. There will be, we wish there weren't, people who won't make it. And certainly, as I said earlier, you've talked about, your dad's talked about it for many years, we'll have kingdom/humanitarian funds to help, stem the tide of that. But people have to choose that of their own free will. You can't forcibly make them acclimate. And that's God, even God doesn't interfere with our free will. So, no, but I think you made some really, really great points. So I'm going to do a little different thing here today. I always ask, our guests, obviously, last words for the audience and where people can find your work, but you have your own unique link apart from your dad that I really want to steer people towards so they can see what you've, brilliantly put together. So if you would, and good sir, please tell us where we can find your work and last thoughts you have for today.
Well, thank you so much, John. And so I do have a YouTube, a Twitch, and a Rumble. I'm on the YouTube most often, and what I do over there is crypto education. I do not tend to talk about everything else except when people ask. And the reason I do that is because I want to get as many people onto the raft as possible. And I don't care why you're getting on the raft. You don't need to believe anything. You don't need to be preparing for it. I want as many folks to be knowledgeable about how blockchain technology works and how it's going to change our world, because I can look throughout history and look at financial shifts that were small and they left so many people behind. They absolutely destroyed the financial futures of generations, and they were small. This is a monumental, the largest shift in all of human history in regards to how we decide ownership, data, wealth, value, everything. The largest shift in human history. And so that's what I try to just answer people's questions. I want people to understand any part of blockchain technology that I can, and also how much we can leverage it. And so I have a really fun challenge going on right now, Zero to Retirement, where we're trying to not buy anything. We're trying to just take advantage of the new programs and learn about the new financial system in the same process. Because very soon, you're going to become the bank. You're going to be providing liquidity for a staking pool, and you're going to be receiving an interest off of it. Well, that technology already exists. It might be a good idea to learn how it works now before you're risking $1 million on it. And that's where I sit, John. I don't try to convince anyone to buy anything. I want them to know how it works, when it happens, or at least know as much as they possibly can about how it works. And that's really been my vision. That's been my entire thing with coming on to channels and everything else. It's just the idea that I want as many people to be aware of what's happening, and as many people to prepare to at least not be taken advantage of.
I appreciate that. And I know I appreciate our audience does and yours does respectively. And again, it's complementary. We're both trying to get people, educated, prepped up, and in the most advantageous position to win. It's, at the end of the day, what it's all about.
Yep.
So appreciate that.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. There's
Yeah.
nothing more, and we live in the information age.
Yeah.
There's nothing that we have more. We've never had the ability to be as knowledgeable as we do today. And we need to take
Yeah.
advantage of it and not take it for granted.
Yeah, at any age, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's all fair play, and ignorance is certainly not bliss. So I will take I will take your links. Of course, we'll take them and leave them in the description so people can find your work. Thank you for that, Zester. Folks, also with the reset that's incoming here sooner than later, if you have currencies or looking to add to cache what you have, Dinar, Dong, Zim, Boulevard, and a whole bunch of other things, TieBot, that are all tied to this whole thing, gold and silver, the blockchain. They all are interoperably connected. We'll leave that link in the description for you below and the video as well. Zester, thanks for joining us, good sir, for breaking it all down and providing brilliant, illuminating articulation as well that the audience needs. Appreciate your time. Happy Thanksgiving, you and your dad. Hope you guys have a great holiday, and hopefully we'll see you in the not too distant future.
Now, thank you so much, John. It was a pleasure, and I hope you have an awesome Thanksgiving as well.
Thank you, sir. Take care.